What's up, y'all, and welcome back to episode 7 of the Unhemmed version. Wow, super crazy. I've been pretty consistent as well with my recording and the support and the words of encouragement. Thank you. Because sometimes, the encourager does need encouragement. And so I know that I'm called to do this full time. I wish I knew like when it was going to happen, and I wish I knew the how, and I wish I knew the avenue, the path that is I'm going to end up taking. And I don't know all of that. I do know that I am called to use my platform, use this platform and use my influence for good. And that has transpired into me using my own personal testimony to, of course, inspire others. And I hope to continue doing that as long as God sees fit for me to do so. I thought with everything going on social media, there's been a lot of talk about Christians and what Christians should and shouldn't be doing. And I wanted to come on and really just kind of share my own personal journey and walk with all of you in the hopes that it'll reach um, the one who needs it most. That's really always the end goal for me. Um, but everyone says they were raised in the church, but I was. My mom kept us in church, and I really credit going to church as a young girl. It kind of brought me out of my shell. I was super shy. I think a lot of that had to do with just my overall confidence and like how I saw myself. I had, eczema growing up, which I speak about a little bit on the blogging things. And I think because of my eczema, it really shaped how I viewed beauty as a young girl. And I did not view myself as beautiful, as pretty, because I had this skin disease that really took over my entire body. And there was no cure for it. You could almost treat the symptoms of it, but there was no overall cure for eczema. So I think going to church, with other younger kids, it really helped me come out of my shell a little bit when we had to do like Easter speeches and when we had to pray. And I remember one time at children's church having the confidence to raise my hand to pray. And I had never done that before. And of course, would say my prayers like at bedtime. Um, but literally raise my hand. And I don't remember the prayer specifically, but I remember people raving to my mom that had I had a gift and that my voice, right, was going to help others in some capacity. And I find that to be so crazy because I do that kind of outside of the church walls, but going to church as a young girl just really helped kind of shape my, I think, identity. And it also helped me kind of understand the yays and the nays, the do's and the don'ts. And, you know, purity culture, of course, was also, I think, pushed as well. And the simple message was just don't do it, which was also what my mom was sharing as well. So everyone was just saying, don't engage in premarital sex, but no one ever shared, right, the why behind it all. And so, as a young girl, I just kind of not necessarily became rebellious, but as a young girl, I was very curious just about life and about the things that I was exposed to. And as a result of that, I have probably made a lot of mistakes that I didn't necessarily have to make. But I am one that has just simply had to learn a lot of things the hard way. And in all of that, what I can tell you is that God has literally been my saving grace since I was born. Like, there's so many memories that I have where I can remember, like, if it hadn't have been for God, I do not know how I would have ended up here, right? I do not know how I would be in my right mind. Like, I don't know how I would have landed the jobs that I have. It was simply all because, right, God keeps choosing me, and God keeps choosing me even when I do not choose God. So I think a lot of the messaging right now on social media about, you know, what Christians should and shouldn't entertain, here's what I know to be true. In the seasons of my life where I have been in the most mess, whether it's been dating, friendships, career wise, that is where God has shown up the most, is in my mess. And most of the times in my mess, right, I haven't really been in my word. I haven't really been in church. I haven't really been, right, praying. But it's simply because of God's grace and mercy, right, that God comes in and does what? Comes in to provide me and extend me with grace, which we all need. We all need grace. We all need, right, God's love. And you have to view your relationship with God as if it's like your mother and your father. Even if you grew up without one. So I grew up without my father in the picture. My mom has been there since day one, and she has literally given her all. My mom, she still is this praying woman, and she still sometimes will be like, did you pray about it? Like, did God tell you to take that job? Did God tell you to make that move? Right? What did God say, about, dating? I was on the dating apps once, and she was like, what did God say about that? And I was like, not her trying to bring God into the dating apps. But the accountability that she has always given me has not been this judgmental, forcing her relationship with God onto me, but really encouraged me to have my own relationship with God, which is really what I hope to be able to encourage all of you to do, is that you simply just need to have your own personal relationship with God and know that the things that convict you will not convict others, and vice versa. So your relationship and your walk is going to be personal, and there's going to be challenge areas that look very different. So, like for me, a challenge, if I can be like truthful with you all, I don't have a struggle or a challenge with drinking, or do I have a struggle or a challenge with drugs? Like, those are not my struggle areas. What do I have, right, issues with? Because I think a lot of times people view my life and just assume that I live this really simple, perfected life in the sense. But I do have other struggle areas. I have discovered, and I'll get into this like a little bit more, but I have discovered like I am, I think I am sometimes hooked in not trying to find love, because I enjoy being single. And I think now at 31, I'll be 32 in June. I don't know if marriage is still in the running for me. I think I have been exposed to a lot. I've seen a lot. I've heard a lot. That I just don't know if marriage is my heart desire anymore. But I still love love. I still believe in love. Um, and I still support, right, love in marriages. I just don't know if it's for me anymore. And some people are going to be like, well, that's really odd of you because you're so young still. Um, but, I don't know that marriage is still in the running for me. I don't have a desire to have kids, right? Now, if it's in God's plan, right, it's going to happen one way or another. But it's not in my plan, right? It's not something that I desire to happen. I struggle with sometimes letting go, right? And letting God be God. I'm so used to having plan A and a plan B and maybe even a plan C. And I give God full reign to do whatever it is that He desires to do and sees is best for me. But sometimes it's really hard for me to let God be God. I, had 3 interviews last semester, so August to December. And I just knew one of those jobs were mine, like, had to be mine. And I made it to the second round for all three. And you want to know what God did? God closed the door. And God does that every single time. And why? Because He's looking out for me. God knows, one, He knows the greater, the bigger plan that's in the works for me. But God also can see what's on the other side of my yes to taking something that is less than His best for me. And so that's sometimes a hard pill for us to swallow, because we think like, why would God close the door? Like, why would God not want me to make more money? Why would God not want me to get a promotion? And it's not that. You need to shift your perspective and know that God doesn't want you to sell yourself short. And because if we want to go back to what the word says, the word speaks really pivotal on, if you look at Romans 8:28, right, it says that we know that all things work together for the good of those, right, who love the Lord and are called according to His purpose. So everything that you've been allowed access to is attached to your purpose. Even the mistakes that you've made are attached to your purpose, to this greater calling. And most of us are still running from our calling, aka me. I'm still running, in some areas. I'm learning not to run as much, because even though I've been running, the calling keeps coming. Like, it keeps presenting itself to me. It keeps popping up on my radar. So you really can't outrun the call, but you can try, right? Um, I also want to highlight, like, Jeremiah 29:11 talks about, for I know the plans that I have for you, right? Plans to prosper you and not harm you. So know that rejection from God is God's protection. And sometimes that just doesn't add up, because you're like, Lord, it doesn't make sense. Like, I'm like, why would you send me on 3 interviews? Let me get the second round for all three, only to then in the end tell me no, right? And it's because, right, it's all a part of your journey, right? Everything is an experience that is prepping you for, right, God's aha moment. And there's so much joy, there's so much peace, right, in what God desires to give you. And I could sit here all day and tell you about the many times where, like, God stepped in. But when God, I think we've really gotten away from, like, recognizing, right, what's God versus what's man. And the way I know that things are God is simply because I will sometimes not not be praying, not be seeking for confirmation on something. So, for example, this apartment that I live in now, it is such a beauty. It's got beautiful, like, scenic views, and it's so, like, the perfect size for me. I live in a studio apartment, and it's the perfect size, and it's got all these, like, new and updated appliances, and it's like, it's a dream. Like, if I it's not what I had envisioned for myself, because in my mind I could not afford this place. Hello, somebody. And I've been wanting to live downtown since I moved to Birmingham. um, when I moved here 5 years ago, I was like, man, I wish I could live downtown. But I was like, I can't afford to live downtown because I work in higher ed. Higher ed, you don't get paid a lot of money, and also you get paid monthly. So, shout out to all of you monthly. It's a struggle. But I was, like, I don't think this is in my price range, right? But I believed wholeheartedly that God was leading me, right, to live downtown, because God wanted to grant me the desires of my heart. And your desire, right, your heart desires, they come from God. So don't ignore, right, what sits here. Now you got to be careful, right, because your heart, okay, it can be misleading in a lot of areas. But, right, your heart desires, those deep down things that keep presenting themselves to you, that keep popping up on your radar, things that just keep aligning, right, with your path. Know that those are signs of confirmation from God. So here I am, unsure, right, about where I'm supposed to be living, and I am homeless. Okay, you can go read the vlog. I'm sorry, the blog about me being homeless. I was homeless for 20 days, the month of February. Actually, it's so crazy. So this time last year, I had no place to call home, and I was sleeping in my car some nights. I was sleeping in my office some nights. I was sleeping in hotels some nights, and I was also driving back and forth to my hometown of Florence and sleeping there. Wherever it worked best for my schedule is where I would lay my head at night. And it was this really just crazy journey. But the entire time, I felt that God was with me. And I know that to be true because God would lead me where I needed to sleep my head for the night. So if it was sleeping in my car, God would lead me to the parking lot that I needed to sleep in. And never was my car broken into, was I ever approached by anyone. I got sweet rest, uninterrupted rest. Like it felt like I had slept in a studio apartment, right, with downtown scenic views. And I was going to an apartment every for the month of January because I knew my lease was not going to be renewed at my older place that I was staying. And I would go to this apartment complex that I thought was beautiful. It was brand new and it was in the heart of downtown. And I would go to the parking lot and I would literally pray like, Lord, I just see myself living downtown. And I just feel like it's in your plan for me to live here next because after this, right, I'm going to become a homeowner, right? That's the next thing on the agenda. So I was like, this is my one opportunity to make my downtown city girl vibes come true. So I would go to this complex every single night for about 2 weeks and I would pray. And I would say, Lord, if it is your will, Father, it is your bill. So I'm not even worried about how I'm going to pay for it, so to speak. Because I was paying $600 in rent. I was living in the basement of someone's house. They had turned into a 2-bedroom basement. So like going from 600, my rent was about to double regardless about where I was going to live. And so that was going to be money that I had to find. And obviously it's in, right? It's in my monthly check, but that means I don't have as much play money anymore. So, anyways, I go through right this journey and I go and I pray every 2 weeks. I mean, I could pray for those 2 weeks and literally finally get to go view the apartment. They tell me they have one left. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is about to be the one for me. Like, they literally only have one apartment left. I went with my mom and my grandmother, and we go in there, and y'all, I was so disappointed. The studio was so small. It's like you stepped in, and it was like kitchen, bedroom, everything was compact, like right here. This is it. And I was like, this ain't it. This is not of God. Okay. And so, as hurt as I was by the whole thing, I was like, okay, that's okay. So I thought, man, did I miss God and what I was praying? Like, was I praying from my flesh, right? Or was that my spirit man talking to me because I felt so strongly that I was about to move downtown? Well, I live downtown and it has been, I love it. I love every part of it. I love hearing the dumpster pick up at 2 a.m. every morning. Like, I just love everything about it. And I love Birmingham. And God led me to live here in Birmingham. Like, I could sit here all day long. As a matter of fact, it's funny to me living in Birmingham because I made a lot of mistakes in Birmingham. So I dated a guy who lived in Birmingham and we were long distance. And when living in Birmingham, I used to come down here all the time to see him. Like, I pretty much stayed, my weekends I spent in Birmingham with him. And it's so crazy that like I never saw myself living in Birmingham. Um, but I stayed here so much, right? I was here all the time with him. And so a lot of my little crazy silly mistakes that I made in college, even when I like wasn't dating him and I was talking to guys that lived in Birmingham and I was like coming to see them, like a lot of mistakes I made right here in the great city of Birmingham, Alabama. But let's talk about God's grace and God's mercy in covering me and really shielding me. Like God was exposing me to a city that I was going to one day call home, and I didn't even know it to be true. And yet, and still, right, God protected me. And I talk a lot about God's protection and God's grace in my mess. A lot of times, like people like to say, like, oh, like God can only bless you, right, when you're, doing the will of the Father, right? When you're doing good, right? When you're on the right path. And I just know that to not be 100% true. God has been God, whether I've been doing my part or not. God is still good. God has still been faithful. God is still extending me grace. I mean, and all I can sit here and talk to you. I've been celibate for 7.5, 8 years. I can't remember quite how long it was. It was one of the two. Um, and I've also engaged in premarital sex. I've been on both ends of the totem pole. And what I know to be true is like the same God that was covering me and loving on me during my celibacy journey is the same God that was loving on me while I was out here pop locking and dropping it. And how do I know that to be true? Well, several reasons. Because I'm still I'm still healthy, I'm still whole. Um, and I'd be lying to you all because this is the unhemmed version. I'd be lying to you all if I say that I never caught anything, right? But the things that I caught, I was able to get rid of. Praise God. Oof. And that is, I'm so trusting. I was at a stage in my life where like I would only engage in sexual encounters with guys that I was dating, right? My boyfriend, guys that I felt comfortable enough to go there with. And yet, and still, that meant nothing to them because they sometimes would still step out. And even the guy, well, let me not say the guy, but even the guys who I'd been in a relationship with long term, we're talking about 2.5, 3 years, still cheated, right? And still risked not only themselves, but they put me at risk too. And so there was this one time I went to a doctor, and the doctor was like, "So you're only engaging, like he's your only partner?" Yes. Well, she was trying to respectfully say, "Sweetheart, you're not his only partner." She was trying to, I guess, keep her job. But she was like, "You're not his only partner. You need to be asking him questions." And so a lot of times, like, that had to have been, right, God looking out for me when I wasn't looking out for myself. It's the same thing. There was even a time where, and this happened, since I've, been here in Birmingham, where I was talking to this guy and had caught a really horrible case, horrible case of BV. I mean, my stomach was I was in such excruciating pain, but I was still going to work. I was still doing my everyday routine. I finally go to urgent care because I just can't, I can no longer bear the pain. And the nurse practitioner says, "Are you okay?" She was like, "With the way that it's escalated, like it's progressed in your body," she's like, "You should not be able to walk in here normal, right? Like you should be in that much pain that you shouldn't have been able to walk yourself in here." But again, God has covered me, right? When I haven't tried to cover myself. And so I want you to know that there is nothing that you can do that would cause God to do away with you, right? God is so loving, right? And so kind and so gracious that God literally is always welcoming you back with open arms, right? And even though like I have not stepped foot in a church in a really long time. So I was connected to this church in Huntsville, and I'm not going to say any names, but if you know, you know. And I love that church, and I still have the utmost respect for that church and for the leaders, even though the church itself no longer exists as it once was. It's under new leadership, under a new name, and I'm pretty sure their entire mission is different. And let's come to this amazing church. And it was so crazy because in a lot of cases, I literally came out my shell in so many areas spiritually. Like I was cutting off everything and everybody that did not align with God's will. Like it was just like, yeah, no, you gotta go. Nah, you too. It was kind of like the Oprah. It was like, you gotta go, and you gotta go, and you gotta go. Because God is just calling me to another level, and I can't go there right with you, unfortunately. And as much as it may have hurt, it may have sucked in the process, God literally, right, was just calling me, right, to be more, to do more. And that required me to go through this stage of isolation and separation. So, anyways, as I'm cutting things off and I'm having to cut people off too, I am literally being blessed. I mean, beyond measures. Like, God is opening up doors for me that I never knew were possible for myself. God was literally like, I was having like bills be paid for, like just in the system, there'd be a glitch. And I was like, hey, I was like, yeah, I didn't pay this. It's like, well, ma'am, the payment's already posted. Okay, ma'am, but who posted it? And I know y'all gonna be like, girl, why are you asking questions about a bill that's been paid? Because I was like, I don't want them to come back, because when I was living in Huntsville, I really was like living on a wing and a prayer. Hello, somebody. And I was like, I'm not gonna have this money. So like I would much rather pay you all and then y'all, put that on next month's bill or something. I was having bills we paid for. I would find money in the most randomest places. Like I'd pull up to the gas station to pump gas. I was a recruiter at the time. So I spent a lot of time on the road and at gas stations. I put the gas stations and literally there would be $20 bills at the pump that I pulled up to. And I'd be looking around because I would think it's some kind of trap. Just the work of the Lord, okay? It was the work of the Lord. It was the goodness of God Himself. I've said all this to say, and I hope that you know that there were a lot of things I wanted to be involved in at the church that God would not open a door for me to engage with. And I think it's taken me now to realize that God was covering me even then because a lot of people did not have positive experiences at this church. I did, but I also think I had this covering that God kept me shielded from certain people and certain spaces, even though I wanted to be involved in these other areas. This is what God shared with me this morning in my just quiet time. God said that my relationship with God is more important than my placement in church. And I hope that reaches whoever it needs to reach. But your relationship with God is the utmost important thing ever. Period. Point blank. I think that God has shielded me in a lot of areas, relationships wise, like friendship wise, and I'm grateful. And it hasn't always felt good. Disconnecting people that I love, that I admire, that I've had so many great memories with. It sucks sometimes to have to separate yourself from them. But I trust God and I trust God's plan for my life. And I trust that God is going to continue, right, to be God, regardless of what I do over here on the other side. I love God. I wholeheartedly am grateful for my portion and what God has given me. God gave me this platform, which I'm oh so grateful for. And I hope that I continue to steward it well. This has been brought up a whirlwind of emotions, but I hope that it helps you understand that God is going to be God regardless. And that there is nothing that you can do that is going to make God change His mind about you. God loves you, God cares for you, and God is going to continue to choose you until you start choosing you too. Y'all be blessed, and don't forget #be inspired today.